Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined once again by Harrison Meagher. And thank you so much, Harrison, for taking the time to come back to be here with me, this time from Rishikesh in India. So thank you for being there, really early morning for you, which is really nice. And as always, such a pleasure to chat. I think that the podcast episode that we've done was 2 years ago. And as well, we've had many conversations through the years. But yeah, it's just for everybody that is watching and listening to us, can you reintroduce yourself? And perhaps, there's different parts of yourself and different understandings as well.
Yeah. So thank you for having me, Brian. It's always a pleasure. Before we started recording, I was telling you that I'm very intentional. I've become more intentional with my time recently, and I choose to spend it with people that I feel very seen, held, loved, inspired by, and you're definitely one of those people. So thank you for having me, and I'm excited to have this chat. So yeah, it's been 2 years. It's been a very quick 2 years. But so now in the world, I still do a lot of heart-led consciousness, presence, mindfulness teaching in the world. I'm currently expressing it through the business lens. So I help spiritual business owners, spiritual entrepreneurs really make more impact in the world with their magic, with their heart, with their service. And really it's a reflection of my journey, right? I've come from, a very short version of it. I came from working as a personal trainer, then in psychotherapy, mental health, and into spiritual channeling, offering my heart to the world. And now I really hold the hand of other soul-driven, heart-led, purposeful leaders to really expand, right? Not just to make more impact, to get more clients, all those beautiful things, but to really make sure that their purpose, their presence, their heart is in the service that they're giving the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's so nice. It's, I have a lot of conversations with people, both clients, friends, and, attendees, and in conversations around that piece of, the business side of things, and how I keep on telling people, like, my journey is the one that then makes my business. Like where I am and what I keep on understanding and different versions of myself. Like that's then what I'm bringing to my business. And I think that the more that we're able to do that, the more that we're able to actually resonate with the people that then we are supporting.
Yeah, it's like this. I'm happy we're starting here, Brian, because it's so powerful, right? It's like this. I did a post yesterday talking about niches and like finding your niche and taking what you just beautifully said. Your niche is you, right? You're the niche. You're your perfect avatar. You're the person that you should be attracting and manifesting. Maybe not the person you are now, right? But a version of you that you have transformed, loved, evolved through. If you can really stand in that, as you highlighted, you become magnetizing, you become magical, you become this pillar that people see. They'll see themselves in the journey that you've already walked.
Yeah. And a lot of times with that as well, it makes it, in a sense, effortless.
Yes.
Because you're not trying to force. Yeah. You're not trying to force something that is not really there. And I feel a lot of times that's something that through the years I've had different, like consultants or marketing people telling me, what you were saying about niche or this or that, and do, all of these different strategies. I'm like, there's something in those things that I know that they could potentially work, but they don't work for me. So therefore, I cannot use them. And it's interesting, a lot of times with that, it's just the right people always comes. And I'm happy with that.
Yeah, it's a big surrendering to that, and knowing that, zooming all the way out, if you are identifying, much like me, much like Brian, as a very conscious and spiritual being, then part of that is understanding that in many ways the big part of you is already there, right? That presence that is you, that we'll speak about today,
Mm,
that presence that is you is full and whole already. So
mm,
the more that you can connect to that through your messaging, through your offers, through your programs, through your videos, the more that, like, as a side effect, you attract people, but as the main objective, you don't need to force anything. You don't burn out. You don't get to the point where you're hustling and grinding, because you're connected to that source that already knows where it is.
mm. Yes, yes, yes. Let's go, now that you mentioned presence, let's go into exploring that a little bit more. And I would love for you to start sharing before I start to bring my side into that conversation. So, when you're saying presence, what do you mean? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start, Brian, because again, in this spiritual community, we get stuck with words. So we need our minds, our beautiful minds need definitions, need some understanding from then which we can flow from. So yeah, so presence for me, how I define it, is that deep divine self that we all are, that deep divine, whole, powerful, magical, medicinal self that is in the hearts of all of us, is in my heart, is in Brian's heart, is in every single person that's tuning and listening, right? That presence, it channels through you, right? We're all channels of this consciousness, and you can relate to that consciousness in any way you want. You can call it God, the divine, the field, Buddha, Allah, Christ consciousness, whatever your flavor of perception is. But the thing that relates to all of us is that it's in the hearts of everyone tuning in. And in any given moment, today, within this sort of business context, you can choose to infuse that presence into the things that you're expressing out into the world. And my perspective is, when you do that, when you make that choice of presence infusement, that is really where the magic lies, right? That is really where, your videos, your offers, the ways that you're showing up, they make more impact, because that presence is felt by the other presence on the side of the screen that is taking it in.
Mm, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting, and why I wanted for you to share that, because as you're saying, a lot of times we use words and we don't perhaps know what it is that we're meaning. We don't understand it. And even what you just mentioned, like what do we, connect with in terms of consciousness, universe, God, or any other label or name that you just mentioned, that doesn't take away from the ism or the what it is. And how we connect with it can be different, and how we express it can be different. Yet, as you're saying, when we are infusing that presence into what we are doing, then people notice. And
Yeah.
I just as we're recording this, I just came back from a festival called Earthbeat,
Mm.
where I held this workshop. And one of the things that a lot of people after the workshop and in the following days, they kept on coming and telling me, was how they actually really felt my presence, and how I held them, and how they felt supported by me, and how I was able to, be there and articulate and just have that. And I'm like, yes, if I'm there, I'm doing that. If I'm here,
Of
I'm with
course.
you here,
Yeah.
Harrison. Like
Yeah.
this is one of the things that it's an interesting thing because you're talking about this presence as this wholeness or this
Mm,
beingness, and then
yeah.
we have presence of the experience of that, which
Yes.
is if I am actually present here with you, I am
Yeah.
connected to that. And this
Yes.
is a lot of times the beautiful dance that I feel a lot of our lives, which is how do we get to that place of understanding? We are that and we are this. So I
Mm,
might have that wholeness or that presence as you're mentioning, and I might not experience it all of the time. And yet that's still there. Just because I don't experience it all of the time, that doesn't mean that it's not there. And whenever I
that's
connect with it, you can sense it.
yes. Oh, so many little, so many little tangents here we can go off on, Brian. But I'll just say, firstly, I'm very jealous of all those people that get to be in that workshop with you, getting to receive your presence, even though I'm feeling it very much here now, right? And that's one of the special things about this presence is that there is no time and space with
Mhm.
it, right? So that's whether it's live physically in person, and maybe we can talk about this later in terms of, I do think it's different when it's in the physical location
Mhm.
and it still can be felt across Zoom calls and across the oceans. But I'll say this, and we can go from here, Brian. I this point on feeling it regardless of whether we are perceiving it, that I feel is a very important unlock for all the healers and the intuitive beings that are probably tuning into this episode. I, as an example, am very imperfect. I'm very human. And part of that humanness is sometimes I get stuck in limiting thought patterns and beliefs. Sometimes I get stuck in some of the emotions that are moving through me. And when I go to show up in your example, like in a workshop or maybe holding space for a client, I might feel that, oh, there's no presence here because I'm stuck in this thought or I'm stuck in this emotion. But every single time I've made that choice to show up anyway, despite how I perceive my being in that moment, the presence was always still there. It was coming through the darkness, coming through the heaviness, coming through the resistance. So I really want to underline that point because, and again, I just did another video on this before this call. I posted it talking about how when we show up with the devotion to serve a person or a group of people, it can actually bring out the presence if we're getting stuck in our current shadows or resistance.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. You know, this brings me into something that one of my teachers, used to mention from the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, the teachings on Buddha nature and an understanding, that's always there. Whatever it is that we are experiencing, whatever it is that we are believing, thinking, doing, that always is there. And we might not recognize it all of the time, and we might need to, you know, get into some practices or doing certain things that we're doing to be able to get there, to realize that truth that is there, or that being that we already are. And yet, a lot of times we don't experience it. And that is a beautiful dance a lot of times, as you're saying, just showing up, just showing up, just showing up. A lot of times that's enough
Yeah.
for a lot of people. And as you were mentioning, I was actually talking with a client the other day that I told her, when I'm working with someone, I don't see what they see.
Mm,
I see what we are calling here presence.
mm,
I see their perfection. I see their whole being. I see them, in a sense, healed, which is returning to that wholeness.
yeah.
And therefore, I am also inviting them to touch that energy or that understanding so that they can realize that for themselves.
Yeah. That's that's the deepest form of healing, right? That's what any healer, any Reiki master, any yoga teacher, any, whatever your current tool set is, that will be the deepest form of healing you will ever do, right? In my terminology for this same beautiful experience that you're talking about, Brian, is I call it the divine mirror. We are always being that divine mirror. We will always be showing up, especially if we're connected to this source, this presence. What we are doing when we host a retreat, when we host a workshop, when we hold a container for a client, we are holding up our smudge-free divine mirror to show them what they actually are, right? Show them, reflect back to them their power, their magic, their beautiful medicine in the world, long enough for them to grasp it, long enough for them to have that same perception that we have of them, to then for them to choose to step into, because that's the other gift that we're all given. We're all given free will. So most of us are unfortunately unconsciously choosing to stay in the heaviness, to stay in the smallness, to stay in the, oh, I'm not powerful, I'm not magical, I'm not whole. But in those moments when we reflect back to them, we then give them the choice to choose the opposite, to choose the alternative.
Beautiful. Yeah. And this is why I love conversations like this, because perhaps someone really resonates with the concept or the words that you're using as that mirror. And other people might see that divine mirror and be like, I don't resonate with that. And it doesn't matter because as well, they're words. This is a lot of times one of the beautiful things that through the years I have learned is like to relax that as well. As you can see behind me, so many books. Like I love books, and I remember when I was deep into starting to learn about Tibetan Buddhism, and I was reading all of these different, tables of names of things and how this, and then it's like, well, all of this now you need to actually go and experience it and to realize does this word actually connect with you. And it was interesting as well the fact that for me, I learned a lot of teachings in English, and growing up, my native tongue is Spanish. So then it was like all of these different things. It's like, well, like this word in Spanish doesn't have the same flavor as it has in English, but supposedly they are the same word. So then I started to connect more with what's the feeling behind it and how can I actually allow myself to explore that and to be open and to find, as you're saying, that presence or that energy, that allowing. And I love there's something I go back sometimes to something that my Tibetan yoga teacher used to tell me. There is inside of the Tibetan Buddhist culture, there is a lot of different pathways. There's, according to the teachings, 84 different pathways towards reaching the goal of enlightenment. And one of those ways is the path of seeing, or actually, that's just an English translation, but it's more about experiencing. And that is the path of if I recognize something in you and you show me that presence, I feel that presence of myself. So that mirror that you're talking about, or what I've been sharing about me seeing them as that complete being, them allowing themselves, it's part of that path, the path of modeling, of showing, of just showing up to do what we are here to do so that others are able to do that.
It's so beautiful, Brian. This is this is what helps me jump out the bed in the morning, right? This is what I had a beautiful interview yesterday, and one of the questions I was asked was, Harrison, I see you traveling around the world at the moment, and you're still doing these things, doing these podcasts, having your business. And how do you balance all this? How do you continue to show up with so much light and energy and impact? And the answer is what you're saying is when you're connected to this kind of work, this presence work, this purposeful work, it moves through you, right? I used to look at people like Wayne Dyer and Tony Robbins and think, how the hell are they consistently just being on those stages, talking all day with so much beauty and presence moving through them. And now I know, right? Now I know that this when you tap into this field, this presence that we're speaking about, it it moves for you. It really takes that human vessel that is so beautiful that yes has its own boundaries, and maybe we can talk about that later, but it really allows you to show up in these places with that fullness and know that, oh, this is what I'm meant to be doing right now.
Mm. And as you're saying, when that energy is moving, then we get energized, or at least that's my experience.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the things that, I finished this the other day, this workshop, and people were like, wow, that was so powerful, so much energy, how are you not tired? And I'm like, I'm actually energized. I finished workshops or retreats or my classes or working with clients, and I'm energized. There's so much energy moving, and I'm like, I'm ready for more if that's what's there, and if not, then I'm ready for what seemed to be less, where that doesn't exist really, but doing or being or working or not working, it's all like that.
I do think, Brian, and maybe you've experienced this too. Like I very much have felt that energized state. And because we're all on different spectrums of this journey of coming home to presence, this is where our beautiful boundaries come in, right? Like, let's use your example of showing up at retreats and workshops. I've definitely been on both sides of this coin. I've been on the coin side where I can just keep going all day. Then on the other side of the coin, I'll have beliefs come up again. I'll have emotions move through me because they're impacted by the same presence I'm directing at other people, right? It's a boomerang. The love that goes out always comes back. So I'm also healing in these moments of presence that I share with other people. And in those moments of self-healing, I want people listening to tune in and know this, that it's okay to then step back. It's okay to also to not feel super energized in that purpose. And it still means you're in purpose, right? It still means that, okay, now what I actually need, I don't need to go to that workshop. I don't need to go to that retreat. I don't need to do another session with my 10th client for the day, right? I need to step back into my home. I need to meditate. I need to go into nature. I need to nourish my being so then so this beautiful human vessel can feel open again to allow that channel to come through. And maybe you've experienced this, Brian, in the teachings that you've read in your beautiful books. There's a big limiting belief I've seen mostly in the Eastern philosophies that we must transcend the body to be in this consciousness field or this presence field. Like the body is just a vehicle, but the goal is this awakened spiritual state.
Mm.
And I've found in my own experience that it's the opposite, right? This vessel that we're in, it's the portal for the presence to come through.
Mm.
And if that portal, like I just said with the example, is depleted, you haven't looked after it, you haven't given it the devotion that it deserves, then that presence, even though it's constantly, consistently always there, your perception of it is going to be very, let's say, full of illusion and shadow.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I resonated a lot with the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. Because as part of, Siddhartha Gautama's or Buddha's journey, he went to those teachings of, the body doesn't really matter and you need to transcend it, to he couldn't reach enlightenment, and then he started
Without
to
the body.
actually take care of the body.
Yeah.
And and for me, this is, embodiment is one of the biggest things to do all of the time. And, thank you for sharing in terms of this, the energizing part of it for me has to do with the fact that I do create the conditions for that to be my experience. I do make sure that I don't see 10, 20 clients a day, that I have the time for myself every single day to do my practices with my body, to do my meditation practices, to be spending time making my breakfast, just hanging, drinking my mate, my Argentinian drink, or any other tea that I drink, being able to walk to my room or to when I'm going to teach at the university, walking there. So I allow that to be part of my experience. So with all of that, it is most likely one of the many reasons why I feel so energized in those things because I am so, to call it balanced, that I am able to actually show up in that way and not burning out.
This is, if anyone tuning into this show today takes anything from this conversation, it's this, right? This tightrope that we walk between that divine infinite self that has no limits and this beautiful human self that has, as you said, all of these conditions that are necessary to really be harmonious for the channel to be presence filled.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. It's really interesting as well. I would love to get your take on this. I work a lot with women. You know,
Mm.
uh, it's been actually majority of the people that I work with through the years have been women. They are, in my experience, the ones that are leading the way in terms of working with ourselves, both physically, health-wise, spiritually. Um, and it's been really interesting through the years, understanding more and more and more about the fact that we do have, as men and women, a very different experience in terms of our energies and cycles and hormones and so many different things that, I feel a lot of times with all of the women that I've had to work through the years that honoring their needs like that has been even more important than for the men. I don't know what's been your experience like.
Yeah, I love this topic, Brian. This is why I was really pulled to this conversation with you because I know that we resonate so deeply in so many ways, and I could not agree more with this. So I had another question recently from a female. I too have spent a lot of my years supporting. It's been a lot of women, and she asked me, "Where do I start? Right? Where do I start with this beautiful journey of sharing my magic, my medicine, my beautiful gifts with the world?" And my answer was starting to honor your physical cycle. And what I went into is what you're alluding to here, that yes, whether you're in a physical male body or a physical female body, we all have this divine, full, whole presence in us. And yes, whether you're in whatever one of those bodies, we both have the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And these are really the two polarities that we were talking about before that we need to balance. And then when you get to that physical level, based off the physical needs, those polarities in any given week are very different, right? And you gave the example of the monthly cycle, the bleed that women move through. And so what we can start, if you're a woman tuning in, what we can start to do is start to track where you're at in that cycle, and specifically within this spiritual conversation, starting to tune into what are your divine feminine needs, what are your divine masculine needs, right? I'll give a very practical example here. If you have just entered your bleed, you're most likely not going to need a lot of masculine action at the moment. You're most likely going to need a lot of feminine beingness, a lot of feminine stillness, a lot of feminine sort of just tuning in to what's moving through you and not doing anything at all. Then when you come out of the bleed, you're most likely going to have, okay, the masculine is rising again. So that's going to be a good time within the business context as an example. You're going to want to produce a lot of things. You're going to want to go out into the world, honoring that masculine energy moving through you, and share your light, right? Share the things on your heart.
Yes, yes, yes. It's, like some of the things that through the years I've been understanding more and more and more. And there is such an interesting thing because what we usually see is work, 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 hustle, 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 do, do, do. And it's challenging. I mean, that's challenging just for anyone because that's what leads them to burnout. Also, it's challenging for women, especially in terms of those cycles, because you cannot honor where you are any given day if instead of living from that presence and from your present moment experience, you are functioning from what supposedly society
What
is
you
telling you
think.
to do. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to speak to the men too quickly, Brian, because we're both, we're both men here. And, I have served a lot of women, but actually recently in my recent endeavors, I've actually been attracting a lot of beautiful, sensitive men, much like ourselves. So I want to just quickly, on the other end of the scale, for the physical males, what I've noticed both in myself and in the men I've supported is that cycle that I talked about, that's on a monthly sort of flow, if you want to call it, for the females, is on a daily flow for men, right? We have that same monthly clock, if you want to call it that, within a daily expression. I just speak for myself, right? I move through all the things from morning to night. And so, what men can practically do within the honoring of these polarities is, again, as Brian is saying, tune in to what is actually needed, right? Do you actually need to be taking action right now in this moment? I know for me, with my clock in the mornings, which it is right now, this is a really good time for me to speak, right? To do the things outward in my business, to show up online, to make the content, to write. But then in the evenings, my feminine rises, right? And my feminine rises to be in more stillness, to meditate, to be in nature, to not talk to anyone, right? To just be with that presence. So just for the men, right? Tune into your daily cycle, and that can be really helpful for walking this balanced line.
Yes. And, I think that the tuning in, as you're saying, it doesn't matter whether we are men or female. Like, the what our experience of any given moment is unique. And as well, I think that the capacity that we have to be present, to notice what's the thing that at this moment I am needing, or what are the right conditions for me to, show up for myself when I know myself better.
Yeah.
Because as you're saying, you have noticed within your experience certain patterns. So
Yes.
therefore, you can start to create your conditions to match that. And potentially at some point that will change, and then you reassess.
And then
And
you reassess.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that a lot of times I tell people, like, last week at uni, I was actually teaching this. I was telling them, if you don't realize at which moments during your days or your weeks, it's when you have more energy for one thing or more energy for that, or less energy and you're needing to be nourished or to be in stillness or to be in nature. If you don't know that, it is perhaps a little bit more challenging to then understand, okay, this is the right time for me to go and read my books and study for the assignment or for the exam, because I don't know when I have that energy. So the more that we get to know ourselves, the easier it is.
It I mean, I'm listening to this I'm taking myself out of my body at the moment, Brian, and listening to this as someone tuning in, and it can appear simple what we're saying. It can appear like, of course, this is what I need to do, but why aren't we doing it? Right?
Yeah.
Why isn't it happening? And I would say one of those answers is that if you're like me, you have probably spent a big chunk of your life externalizing yourself. And what I mean by that is you're looking for yourself in the outside world because that's what you've been conditioned to do, right? You've been conditioned to outsource your power to a teacher, to a lover, to a government, to a politician, to a news agency. And then you prescribe what is good or bad for you based on that external source, right? In the Vedic teachings, which I'm very immersed in at the moment here in India, the Vedic teachings describe it as your either your internal or external locus of power, right? Is your locus of power, is it external, outside of you, or have you reclaimed it and remembered your presence and power? And is your locus of power internal, right? And that, based off where that is in your life, will really start to show up in relation to what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you're saying that it's not, in a sense, it is easy and it is simple, yet we are the ones that sometimes make
Make it
it that that's
complicated.
not the experience. And this is something that I was telling all of my students. You know, they were asking me some more information, and I was telling them all of the information is already out there. You know, we can go to Google, we can go to ChatGPT or whatever it is that we want, any book, all of the information is there. And if all of the information is there, knowing more information, a lot of times is not the answer. It's about how do I, Brian, where I am at this moment in my life, implement those things, embodying those teachings or those understandings. And this is where, and I'm sure that for you, this as well is a lot of your work. It's about unlearning. It's about taking all of the conditioning and all of the programming away from us, you know, retraining ourselves so that then we show up in a different way.
It's it's 99% of the work, Brian, both from my internal journey and the people that come into my world, right? I'm not I've I've slowly over the years stopped teaching anything, right? I am now when I work with a person, and of course I have tools, I have templates, I have because I'm in the business world, right? There's always things, extra little tools and meditations and things I can offer people, and they're needed. I'm not here to say that they're not. And the deeper work, the real work, is what you're saying, is spending enough time in your own internal presence to know what you need to let go of so you can consistently start to show up in the place of power you were born with,
Mhm.
right? That's what's going to change the world. That's what's going to change your business. That's what's going to impact the hearts that you want to impact. You starting to be what you always were on a more devotional, consistent basis.
Mm. Yes, 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 yes. And you know, it's interesting this how a lot of times we are on our own way. And I say this a lot of times with the understanding that how wonderful that I am the one that's in my own way. Because if it would be something external, I couldn't be able to actually do much about it. But because I am the one that I realized, oh, I am the one that if there is stress, I am creating stress. If there's anxiety, I am creating anxiety. If there is certain feelings, I am part of creating that. So if that's me, then I could choose to create something different. So instead of stress, I could choose easefulness, you know, and I could choose balance and I could choose alignment. Again, that doesn't mean that the process of getting there, it's like this and it's so easy, but it's simple. And if I take responsibility and I have that understanding, it's actually me.
Yeah,
Ah,
it's beautiful, Brian. Right. I would highly recommend anyone tuning in. I know we just said stop learning things, but maybe one more. The book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I'm
mm,
sure you've read it, Brian. It tells a beautiful story about the author who was a prisoner in Nazi Germany in one of the concentration camps, and he shares his experience with what you're saying here around even in the most extreme situations where everything outside of you is telling you that things are horrible, that you're the victim, that everything is going to turn into shit and evil. In the book, he explains his reclaiming of the power that even in those situations, you can still choose to have an internal state of stability, of peace, of bliss, of harmony, and no one can take that away from you.
mm, yes, yes. You know, it's I think that in the world at present moment, there's so much going on. And as well as you're saying, we can choose. We can choose what we are seeing, what we are engaging with. We can choose. Now, this choosing, a lot of times, this is where a lot of our work is. This choosing is so unconscious most times that we are not really choosing. We are just on that autopilot and conscious behavior. And this is where the more that we practice whatever, as you're saying, whatever methodology, whatever tool, whatever tradition that we resonate with at each moment, we use that to be able to then choose.
This is the unraveling of I'll throw another quote out here by Mr. Carl Jung, right? Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we will call it fate. Right? This is that work that you're alluding to, that when we start to bring our light of awareness to our internal world, we start to see what we've been manifesting, what we've been attracting from these unconscious choices that were always there, but now we've brought our loving, conscious awareness to it to then be able to unravel it, to change it, right? Very practically for people tuning in, where have you started to, where have you been attracting partners that abuse you or hurt you? And now you can shift that into a more loving, harmonious, right? In your business, where have you been attracting non-abundant situations where you can't make any money? And now you can choose better to attract from your place of fullness and wholeness. And you start to see the abundance that you are reflected in the external world.
Mm. Yes, 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 definitely. I think that switch a lot of times, it's such a wonderful place to realize. And as well at the same time, being kind with ourselves, because a lot of people through the years I have found that they feel guilt or shame or they feel frustration that they've done all of that. And as well, sometimes in the process of bringing more light into situations, you might see something worse than what you know at the moment. So a lot of times, like I tell a lot of times to some of my clients, you might actually feel a little bit worse, or you might start to see that your life is worse before it starts to actually be seen differently.
Yeah, this is a very deep part of this work, Brian, that we can talk about here a little bit. What I've felt has helped with that guilt and shame around what we uncover in the deepness of what we are is I'll go to the deepest spiritual level of this and then we'll work our way up. The divine presence that you are, that we've been speaking about for this whole conversation, it doesn't know good or bad. Good or bad is a label that we've prescribed to the experience that we're having. So in the deepest form, the divine presence that you are is here to experience all of life, not just the beautiful, high, good moments that we've labeled, but also the very heavy, guilt-filled, shame-filled darkness that we are all creating. We're creating the light and we're creating the dark. So one way to help with that guilt around what you are manifesting in the darkness of your unconscious is realizing that the presence of love that you are, it doesn't hold that judgment. It's not manifesting these things because you're an evil, bad person. It's manifesting things because it is a creator. End of story. So we can tune into that and realize, oh, I'm not a bad person. I'm not an evil person. I'm not manifesting these bad situations because, I have something wrong with me. If anything, the things that you're manifesting are showing you the powerful creator being that you are. So it's time, as we've been saying, to choose better, choose a more expanded state rather than situations that keep you small and restricted.
Mm. Yes, yes, I love that. It's a lot of times for me, it's how I use the word compassion or embracing the fullness of my experience, and to understand as well, what I've done in the past and how I behaved in the past. I've already done that, and judging that doesn't support me at this moment. Judging my experiences, judging others' experiences doesn't support me.
Mm.
So again, it's about that understanding of at any given moment, what supports us to, yes, you know, I, and this has been my path, I have chosen to practice and to be more in that energy of what we would call the positive things or the good things. That doesn't take that the other stuff is bad or wrong, or that I need to repress that, or that's not part of life. It's just that I'm choosing to experience certain things now, at this moment, that for me feels more expansive, more abundant, more light. And that doesn't take away from anything else.
No. And this is the journey, right? This is the soul school that we all came here to incarnate as, right? We came here as this beautiful divine presence in human form to feel and experience and move through the whole spectrum of this rainbow of life. And when we can really let go and surrender, and as you said, have that loving compassion for all the lessons, then we realize there's nothing here that we can get wrong, right? I have found a lot of guilt and shame in myself around, I grew up Catholic, and I was taught that my higher power is this God on a cloud that at the end of the journey will judge me wrong or right for the choices that I made or didn't make. And I'm here to tell anyone that's tuning in that may still have parts of this programming inside of them that could not be further from the truth, right? The ending is here. You're in the only moment that ever matters. It's the now. And your choices, while in my opinion, there is always a more expansive versus a more restricted state, as we've been saying, there is no good or bad. So there is no destination that you will get to where you will be condemned for your choices, right? You just get to choose, if you wish, that soul that you are, to come again and to experience this beautiful soul school again.
As you mentioned that, Harrison, it reminded me of something that one of my teachers told me, that he said, whether it is that I reach enlightenment or not, this is in the Buddhist path, whether I reach enlightenment or not, whether I am able to, change my experience towards the end of my life, towards the dying process, whether, like, whatever it is, he said, I'm doing the same thing. Because all that exists is the now. And now, whether I, at some point in my life, reach enlightenment or not, now I'm going to keep on choosing my practice to be more present and more aware, and anything else that one chooses. And each moment it's the same. And once, if if in this lifetime, or when in this lifetime I reach that state, it doesn't change anything. I will keep on doing the same thing. That's the example of, before enlightenment, if you're sweeping your room, after enlightenment you're still sweeping your room, just from a different perspective.
Consciousness
Yes.
state. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like, when I listen to you, Brian, and I hope people tuning in are also feeling this, it allows us to release a lot of the chains and the heaviness that we put on this path. And in my experience, and I try to really teach from this place, especially within the sort of business realm, it's not serious, right? This adventure that we're all on, it should be full of joy and play and curiosity and awe and excitement. And that's not to say that the other experiences and emotions are not meant to be felt. They're very much meant to be felt. And when you can feel them fully, you will be in these states more often. You will be in these more expansive states more often. And you start to realize that that's really when I get to play with this adventure. I get to play with this life, and any interaction starts to be an expression of that.
And one of the things that I often share is that for something to be deep, it doesn't need to be serious. As you're saying, it can be fun. It can also be what we consider serious, for something to be deep. A teaching or a meditation or any practice, It can be as what we consider serious, or it can be really fun and playful. Depth doesn't define how it's going to be. It's all about finding that depth for each of us. And Harrison, I'm just aware of our time, and I would love to keep on talking as always with you. What's something that at this moment is showing up for you that you would like to share with everyone that is listening and watching to us?
Ooh. Well, as we have been talking a lot about presence, Brian, and in my world, as I talked about at the start, I am choosing to share my presence within this service-based business world with the intention of reaching a lot of the hearts that I know are out there that know that they're here to make more impact, right? They know from this place of unconditional love with no pressure, right? That there is something inside of them that, okay, I know I'm magical. I've started to tap into this field and this power that Brian and I have been speaking a lot about in this conversation. And I really want to start sharing it more. I want to reach the masses. I want to reach the people I know I can reach. So what I want to share with people is that, we've never been in a period of human civilization where it's never been easier to do that. And what I'm saying here is there are three really big components that I've experienced in my life that can really propel you. And those three are social media, artificial intelligence, and our ability to get on a plane and travel in and around the world. Right? If you are a sensitive, soul-led, heart-led leader and you're not doing these things, I would invite you to step in, to bring your presence and start showing up online, right? To bring your presence and start using beautiful tools like AI and other things to channel your presence through them, to make content that hits the hearts of the people that you want to hit, to get on that plane, right? To do that scary thing, to travel to New Zealand, to travel to India and look and manifest the hearts that are already looking for your presence. Right. I spent years staying in a little bubble, little home, thinking that my impact was there. And don't get me wrong, I definitely did some of the things I wanted to do. But it wasn't until I stepped into the beyond and stepped beyond my fear of what I thought what I was possible of, that my heart expanded, my service expanded, my business expanded. So my message, Brian, is for the people tuning in, is to do that thing that's scary, right? Do that thing that's unfamiliar and start to utilize what is already here in this present moment.
Beautiful. Thank you, Harrison, for that. And as always, thank you for taking the time to be here, to share your presence, your messages at this present moment as well. As you were saying, for everybody that was listening or watching us, keep the conversation going. Whatever it is that you're listening, what did you hear? What did you learn? Or what are you unlearning? And where are you in your journey? As Harrison just mentioned, if you are wanting to have an impact and touch the hearts of many because you feel that that is your purpose at this moment, what are you doing about it? So let us know in the comments. As always, thank you for being there. Thank you once more, Harrison, for sharing. As always, such a pleasure to share the space with you.
It's very much mutual, Brian. I'm sending you big love. And until our next conversation, I'll hold you in my heart.
Thank you. Thank you, Harrison. And thank you, everyone. And see you next time. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.